Yo, welcome back everybody to a brand new video here on the second channel. It is now time for the meta predictions. I'm going to be predicting what is going to go down at Orlando Regionals this weekend. Orlando is going to be a crazy tournament because it is the largest regional of all time. There's 2,800 people in the tournament. It is a gigantic tournament. We're almost at 3,000 players. It's a crazy time. And of course, it is coming off of EUIC. So we realistically only had about a week to prepare for Orlando coming off of EUIC. Though EUIC, of course, has set the standard for what we're going to see at Orlando. We probably already know what the best decks are going to be and all that stuff. I've done about a week's worth of content here talking about the EUIC results. And yesterday's video, we just looked at online tournament results to see what people are playing post EUIC and how it's affecting the meta. But it is now time for the meta predictions for Orlando Regionals. I'm excited. I will be in attendance at Orlando. So if you see me, don't be afraid to come up and say hi and all that good stuff. And you're on here to the second channel, make sure to subscribe down below. We're on the road to 13,000 subs and all that good stuff. And without further ado, let's get into the prediction. So the first prediction, Charizard, the best deck in the format, Charizard, the undisputed BDIF. Now, there are 3 different versions of the deck right now that I think are going to be looked at. So the main one, the one I think that will see the most amount of play is the Tord build of Charizard, the one that won EUIC, mainly because it's Tord. People are just going to net deck it. I mean, if nobody knows what they want to play to this tournament, there's a good chance they're like, oh, well, let me just play the deck that won EUIC. And it's Tord's list. I mean, Tord's the best player in the game. Let's just play his list. And I think that the Tord deck is a pretty solid 60. There definitely can be changes made to it. I think for starters, we're going to see the Yells, Cheer, and Turos get tweaked a little bit. But if I had to make a prediction of Charizard, what build of Charizard is going to be the most popular, I would say the Tord build with some refinements made to it. Though the William build definitely is also very strong. William's build does have a lot more counters for the mirror, and I think that's going to be the big thing with playing Zard this weekend is countering the mirror match. So the William build will also be fairly popular. It might be more common upon the bigger players in the game as opposed to the Tord build, which might be for more the casual Charizard players as opposed to the more, the top level players who play Charizard. They might try to make some changes to the William build because I think William's build of Charizard is also very, very strong. But there is the Regieleki build, kind of the one that snuck under the radar, had a really good performance day 1. Everyone was like, what the heck, Regieleki and Charizard's doing good. What is going on right now? But, of course, the Regieleki build is still an interesting concept. The idea of Regieleki with Penny does give you some control options. The thing is, though, are you really teching for Snorlax anymore? And not to mention, Regieleki does get a bit worse if we see more Pidgeot control over Snorlax control, due to Luxray being pretty good against Regieleki. They can just sit there and Fang Snipe you into oblivion. So I do think Regieleki is an interesting concept, and this idea of a more like control style Charizard deck might see more play at Orlando. I think some players might pick up on that idea that we saw at EUIC, and maybe they'll adapt it. So there is a chance we're going to see some new versions of this Regieleki Charizard-y control build. But I think the most popular way to play Charizard will be the William build and the Tord build. Tord will be the most common way to play, but I think the William build will be the one that more of the big players will adapt and play. Because obviously Charizard's BDIF for this tournament, and it'll most likely be at least 20 to 22% of the day 1 meta, in my opinion. By far, it's going to be that popular of a deck. You got to remember, biggest regional of all time, a lot of players going to this tournament don't know what to play. They're going to play Charizard, not only one because it's Charizard, because Charizard, big cool Pokemon, mascot of Pokemon basically, but also because it just won the biggest IC of all time. Obviously, it's going to be popular, and it's going to be at least 20 to 22% of the meta. I think Tina is also going to be close behind Charizard in terms of popularity. I don't think it's going to be above 20. It's probably going to be 15%, 14% of the meta, but I do think we're going to see a big uprise in Giratina. I mean, going into this tournament, Giratina does seem to be one of the only solid decks that can actually take down Charizard, but also kind of hold its own against most of the other meta decks. Because while you can build a deck that can beat Charizard, you got to be able to beat other decks, not just Charizard, and Giratina is a deck that can do a lot of that. Now, the Bradner build with the Bayonet I think is really cool. I think post-EUIC, the Bayonet does get a little bit weaker. Shempao, I think, is kind of on the down low a little bit. I think less players are going to play Shempao than it was at EUIC. Though I do think the more vanilla build we saw Azul's group play is going to be the one that will be the most popular. Albeit, I don't know if Tomb is going to be relevant in the deck anymore because now Cleffa is being figured out. I think if anybody does play Zard this weekend, even if they're not playing the William or Tord build, I think Cleffa's still going to be a mainstay in Charizard. Cleffa's just a really good card in Charizard, especially with Tomb. I could see Tomb going back in the deck, but I can honestly see no reason not to just play Cleffa anyways. It's just still a really good card. It's also buddy profitable, and it's not Rotom food. And Rotom can be very annoying to put into play when it gets boss KO'd, and that can lose you the game a lot of the time. So I don't know if the Tomb is needed in Tina. If we're going to see the more vanilla build that Azul played, I think we're probably going to see no Tomb, and probably just another supporter, maybe an Iono, maybe another Switch. second Cram, second Sableye. Definitely some changes can be made to the more vanilla build, but I think the more straightforward way of playing Tina is going to be the more common one. That's not to say Brandner's build won't see play. I'm sure it might see some play. Bayonet still has some surprises behind it, but you can't play the water energy, and you're a little bit more like clunky in that regards. But item lock can still be a very powerful concept in theory. But yeah, Tina will definitely be the second most played deck at Orlando, in my opinion. Again, not a lot of time in between tournaments. Players might be rushing to figure out what they want to play, and Tina beats Charizard. Let's play Tina because I got second place. Next up is the Future Hands deck. Another deck right now that I think is going to be very popular at Orlando. I don't know if it'll be the third most played deck. There's a very good chance it's in the top 5 most played decks, like potentially number 4 or 5. I'm not sure about number 3. 4 or 5, I can see a little bit more likely chance for the Future Iron Hands deck. Now, the Iron Hands deck does need to figure out how it's going to handle the Charizard matchup. And I think that's going to be the big Achilles heel of the deck. We could see, this Heavy Baton Mew build. Mew can be very good against Charizard because it does allow you to KO Charizard. If they take out the Miraidon, they're forced into one prize. There's also the Crisis Punch concept, which you can use with Iron Hands and 3 Iron Crowns to do the knockout on the Charizard for games for 340 damage. So there are some technology ideas, or we could see the Iron Hands try to incorporate more of a Iron Leaves package to try to handle the Charizard. But there is a good chance Iron Hands is going to continue to be a popular deck. It's a very straightforward, fast, aggressive deck, like Miraidon and Roaring Moon were in the last format. And I think a lot of players are just attracted to that idea. Very good chances like top 5 most played deck. Definitely don't disrespect the hands. Lost Box, kind of an underrated deck right now. I was surprised to not see it do as well at EUIC. I mean, it did get top 16, but Lost Box was as popular as I thought it would be, and I think it is still a fantastic play. It might even get better post-EUIC, and that's mainly because Giratina V-Star gets a lot better. This more traditional Lost Box build with the Moon and the Mew seems to be pretty darn good against Giratina, and I think that's a big deal. Now, I think this Mew package is the best way to play the Lost Box deck because Mew does give you a lot of good coverage against Charizard because Roaring Moon is good against Charizard. You have the ability to, like, Raikou hands a Pidgeot, and then you can Moon a Charizard. But how are you taking those last 2 prizes? When you're getting Iono to a small hand, sometimes you can't chain together another Moon, and it can get a little awkward. That's why I like the Mew in the deck, because you can force your opponent to play into Mew, and then you can Mew EX them for game. And I think the Mew is a very good inclusion, because it also just gives you an easier time against Tina. You now have Moon and Mew for Giratina, which is pretty scary for Giratina to handle. But I wouldn't be surprised if Lost Box saw a little bit of a rise in play this weekend. Now, the big story, I think, of EUIC is that Roaring Moon to Dunsparce deck that got top 8. And in all honesty, this is a deck that I think a lot of players are looking at playing for this tournament. Now, top 3 most played decks. Number 1, Charizard. Number 2, Tina. What's going to be that number 3 spot? Is it going to be the Moon, or is it going to be the Iron Hands deck? I think that's kind of the big story right now that a lot of players are thinking of. What's going to be that, 3rd or 4th most played deck? Moon is a good example of what might fill that slot up. I do think this Roaring Moon deck is going to see a ton of play this weekend because 1, it's fun to play. 2, it's pretty good. 3, it seems to have a good Tina Zard matchup. I think the Zard matchups may be shaky due to like Charmander Heat Tackle being annoying for Frenzy Gouging, but I do think that this Roaring Moon dual deck is very strong right now, and I think that it is going to see a ton of play at Orlando. It might be the 3rd or 4th most played deck. Like, I actually can see that happening. Maybe not 3rd most played, but I could definitely see it being in the top 5. See, that's the thing. Like, what's going to be the 3rd most played deck? Will it be the Moon deck? We'll have to see, but I do expect to see a lot of this deck at this tournament. That big win, well, not big win, but that top 8 placement at EUIC and the hype it's getting right now does seem to be pretty real. It does seem to be a pretty legit deck. It's not just like a meme or anything. It definitely is legit, and I do think a lot of players are considering playing it for Orlando. Now, Chien-Pao, I think, has slipped a little bit. It's not as popular for Orlando as I think it will be for EUIC. I think it was like 2nd, 3rd most played deck at EUIC. Not going to be the same thing for Orlando, but I do think Chien-Pao will still be good. It'll still most likely be top 5 most played deck. That'll be your top 5 right there. Zard, Tina, Moon to Dunsparce, Chien-Pao, Iron Hands. There you go. That's your top 5 meta for Orlando Regionals right there. I'm predicting it right now. I don't know the order of number 3, 4, 5, but it'll be a tie between like Chien-Pao, Dunsparce, Moon, and then Iron Hands. But yes, Chien-Pao still decent. I think it does have to adapt to the Eerie meta, the TM Devo meta. Probably going to have to start seeing stuff like Arctibax come into the deck. We know that Hector Ibarra did play that Arctibax, and I think the Arctibax is a really good inclusion. It's really good against Eerie and really good against TM Devo. Or even just playing 4 candies is also going to be very good against the TM Devos and stuff. So yeah, I think Chien-Pao still going to be presented pretty well. Zard matchup still not terrible. Your Tina matchup doesn't seem bad either, especially if they're not playing the Bayonet. The Chien-Pao does still seem pretty good. And now we got to talk about Gardevoir. Now, Gardy has fallen off since rotation, but it did almost get top 8. In fact, it bubbled out of top 8. It was in contention for top 8. It had enough points to get top 8. Unfortunately, Fabian did bubble, but Gardevoir definitely is put back on the map. Now, Gardevoir is a scary deck. It definitely seems like it's good against top decks if people do not respect it. And by respecting it, I mean they're not playing any vacuums in their deck. And that's going to be the main thing holding Guardy back is, will Lost Vacuum see any play this weekend? How much Vacuum is going to see play? The main decks that are going to play Vacuum, I mean, realistically, any deck can play Vacuum. I think the ones that won't play it are like the Ancient decks, but Future can play it. Zard can definitely play 2 Vacuums. Tina can play Vacuum. It helps Tina, if anything. And of course, stuff like Arc Piles will play Vacuum. Vacuum's popularity will impact how popular Guardy is. Now, I can see Guardy seeing more play for this tournament, but I might not see it do as well because I think more people are now going to be respecting the Gardevoir. The other big issue Gardevoir faces is the Dunsparce Moon deck, and even just the Moons in general, because there's another Moon deck we're going to talk about a little bit later on, obviously, in this video. Guardy is scared of those Moons. Moon eats Guardy for breakfast, and Gardevoir is less like, because we see this build here, the Fabian build, placed a Turo, but no Collapse Stadium. A lot of the time, you might have a Guardy EX stuck in play. Roaring Moon's going to come up and be like, give me that Prime Catcher Guardy KO. Take these 2 prizes. Yum, yum, yum. I win the game. That's Guardy's biggest weakness right now is the popularity of Vacuum, and even Moon's popularity is going to be very scary for it. But there is still a good chance Guardy does well. I do think we'll see a little bit more Guardy FC play this weekend. I don't know about getting top 8, though. It does seem that the meta might be a little hostile for it. The meta might have to sizzle down a little bit for Guardy to have like a real good run. But Pidgeot Control. Now, I don't think Pidgeot Control is going to be like popular. I do think it'll still perform well. And the reason is because this is a deck that real good players will pilot well. Like, you can't be like a newer player and be like, what's a good deck to play? Pidgeot Control? Okay. This deck is hard to play. It's not an easy deck to pilot. Pidgeot Control does require a lot of thinking, a lot of skill. There's a lot of lines you can take. It's a very difficult deck to play, and I don't think that it is for newer players or even the casual player. A casual player would rather just play Charizard or Tina or Moon or Iron Hands over Pidgeot any day of the week. But a lot of the big players will play it, or a lot of good players will play it, I should say. It's not going to be like the most popular deck or anything. But I wouldn't be surprised if Pidgeot got another top 16, maybe even another top 8. It's very, very likely that can happen. Now, Lugia's definitely fallen off a little bit, but I do think that Lugia is still going to see some play regardless. It's still like one of those like big run hot, sack your opponent, destroy them, run them over pretty quickly. I am yet to see if Lugia can actually beat Zard right now. I mean, I know Cinccino's really good in the Zard matchup, and if you play well enough, like if you don't Summoning Star first before they get a Zard out, you're probably fine. But we'll have to see how Lugia performs this weekend. I'm definitely interested in how Lugia can do this weekend post-EUIC. It does seem that the meta is a little hostile for it, especially the popularity of the Iron Hands decks. And I even think the Moon matchup is a little shaky for sure. Your Moon matchup doesn't seem solid for Lugia. So we'll have to see where Lugia goes post-EUIC. I think it's not going to be that popular. It's probably going to fall down quite a bit. There's going to be a couple in day 2. Someone's going to have a good run with Lugia regardless. It's going to happen. It's a deck that, if it runs hot, it's like insane. But it definitely falters a little bit also from just its inconsistencies. It's a pile. It's a bricky deck, and that will hold it back ultimately from doing well. Now, Ancient Box, I definitely am very interested in. I like this deck a lot. Now, it did win in the Seniors Division at EUIC. Gabriel Fernandez did win. It did get a top 16 placement at EUIC. This deck has been put on the map now, and I think that it is strong. Now, is it better than the Dunsparce version of Roaring Moon? It's up in the air. The Roaring Moon Dunsparce build does get access to Dunsparce, so you have a good draw engine, and you get Roaring Moon EX. But the Koraidon build is an all one prize attacking deck, and it has the ability to lean into some big numbers late game. Now, if I were to play Ancient Box, I would maybe consider trying to figure out a way to beat the Charizards, because I think Charizard with double Turo is really scary. Now, Turo might not be as popular in Zard this weekend because I think people are going to tech around with the Tord list. I mean, they're probably going to play at least one Turo still. One Turo is still going to be very popular, I think, at least. But 2 Turos, Yelshir, maybe not as popular. And that will be this deck's biggest issue. Or Roaring Moon in general. Even the double Moon deck will have to deal with, like, the Turos, which is very scary for a deck that aims to 2-shot a lot of the time. But I'm interested in where Ancient Box can do. Hopefully the deck does well, again, at Orlando. I think it will. I think some players will play it. I don't think it's going to be as popular as the Dunsparce build, because that one seems to be the favorite of the 2, but wouldn't be surprised if we saw some Ancient Box do well. Now, Arc Piles. Arc has, it didn't really do as good at EUIC, specifically Arctina. I think a lot of people were high on Arctina. In theory, it has a good Zard matchup, right? You should have a good Zard matchup. With the deck having Iron Leaves, you got the Judge. Judge seems even stronger now because of the Cleffa. Like, if they go Cleffa, you can just go Judge, knock out Cleffa, put him to a 4-card hand. If they have no Rotom in play, you're chilling. Even if you want, you can go, they go Cleffa, Rotom. You can just go Judge, Tomb, and then they're stuck with 4 cards, and they're bricking. It seems good for Orlando. We'll have to see where Arctina goes. It does falter to some awkward draws. That's the one thing holding Arctina back. Its draws can sometimes be pretty bad. you're also very much relying on going first and getting turn energy arc. You're relying on a lot of steps to make it work, but Tina flopping, UIC could be good for it. We'll have to see how Arc Tina does. And can it beat Lost Tina? That's the other thing. Can it beat the other big Giratina deck in the format, the Lost Zone version? All right, then we got Chark, the Arc Armor Rouge deck. Now, this deck, I think, will see some play. I think it's a very fun deck to play. I think a lot of people are very, it's a very appealing deck for a lot of players to play. And if you're somebody who enjoys a good Arc pile, hey, not a bad play for Orlando, in my opinion. I think its Zard matchup's good. I think its Tina matchup's also pretty decent. You have Delphox. Some Tinas don't play Manaphy. Gouging Fire Belt's pretty good. You have the Armor Rouge EX, which is pretty good. And you have the Radiant Heatran. You have a lot of good options against Tina. Wouldn't be surprised if we saw more Arc Armor Rouge in day 2. Maybe a play deck. I don't know if it'll be more popular than Arc Tina, because I think Arc Tina's Zard matchup is more solid overall, but it doesn't seem like a bad play either. And yeah, we'll probably see a couple Arc Armor Rouge in day 2 for sure. Now, the more straightforward Snorlax control, I do think is kind of on the down low right now, and that's just because the Tord Zard deck just kind of is able to beat it with the Turos and the Yell's-Cheer. And like I said, I think Yell's-Cheer is just better in Zard right now over the Palpad, just because Palpad has more uses in different scenarios, because you can use Palpad and a supporter in the same turn you put back, whereas with Yell's-Cheer, you have to wait a turn. But Yell's-Cheer is better against Eries and Misfortune Sisters, which, of course, Snorlax Control likes to gobble up. So we'll have to see if Snorlax Control continue to do well. I don't think it's as good as Pidgeot Control. It's a little bit easier to play, and it can definitely catch Zard players off guard who are cutting the Turos out of their decks. I think there is a chance that the Yell's-Cheer and Turos are going to be slimmed down a little bit from the Tord build in placement of more tech cards. So it could happen. I think Cloth EX is something to consider, too, in these control decks, even the Pidgeot Control deck. But we'll have to see where Snorlax goes. I think it's a bit weaker for this tournament. It does also have a bad Tina matchup, and that's a big deal. Tina's going to be a lot more popular. And your Moon to Dunsparce matchup is pretty abysmal, too. You'd kind of take losses to, like, 3 of the big decks this weekend. I do really want to take that? Probably not. So I'd rather just play Pidgeot at that point. Espathra, really cool deck. Espathra does seem like it's an underrated play for Orlando. Like, in theory, it's good. You have the Banette, and the Banette can be good against Lost Zone decks. It can be good against Shempao. And then you have the Espathra. Espathra is good against Zard, and it's good against the basic decks like the Ancient Piles, and pretty good against Future. So I actually think this deck, low-key, could be a decent play for Orlando. Is it going to be a popular deck? Probably not. I wouldn't be surprised if players who like to play these more rogue-friendly decks to these regionals but have good results with rogue decks will play this deck. Because in theory, it seems good. Like I said, Espathra is really good against the Moon decks, and it's really good against Future. Banette can be good against Shempao. It can be good against some stuff, too. The big thing is you have a nice, reliable grass attacker to beat Charizard. We'll have to see how Espathra does. I'm interested in the deck myself. I think it's a really cool deck, so yeah, I think we'll see it in day 2. I think some of the more rogue-friendly players might pile this deck for sure. All right, Radiant Charizard Lost Box, the underrated way to play Lost Box right now. I think this deck is still kind of a little awkward, but I do like the idea of Radiant Charizard. Radiant Charizard is a very strong card, and do not underestimate the power of Radiant Charizard. Now, Greninja does have more uses than Zard does for the Lost Zone engine, but the Zard and the Lost Zone engine can still be good, especially when you can Mirage Gate to it. Now, the highest placing build of Radiant Zard at EUIC was this Hands Mew build, and we've been seeing this Hands Mew build in the online tourneys before EUIC. Now, will this build continue to do well? Probably. I think the Mew is really good for the Zard matchup, and then obviously you do have the Hands, which can be good in other scenarios. I think your Lost Tina matchup's solid. I mean, you have the Mew and the Zard, which, pretty good against Tina. You also play the Crisis Punch, which is also pretty good against Lost Tina. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Sable Zard deck continued to have some results at Orlando. Won't be very popular, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody played it and had like a decent run with it. Like a potential top 32, yeah, very much could get a top 32 placement. I want Gholdengo to do good. Now, I think Gholdengo is okay for this tournament. Its Zard matchup is a little shaky, mainly because if they play Eerie, and of course, if they have the Radiant Charizard, it gets a little tough. But I want to see Gholdengo do well. I think we'll see at least 1 or 2 in day 2 Orlando. I don't think it'll have like an insanely hot run. It's a really cool deck. Struggles against Eerie, though, and that is one thing that does hold it back. But I don't think its Lost Tina matchup's too bad. You can actually play very aggressive with Palkia Prime Catcher. So you can kind of play aggressive against the Tinas, chase the Tinas down with the Palkia, and then kind of clean up the V-Stars with the Gholdengo. So there's some cool options you can do with the deck. And then, of course, we got Banette Guardy. I wanted to highlight this deck real quick. This is a very underrated deck. I think Gardevoir Banette has a lot of potential to do good. It's a harder deck to play than Espathra Banette. That one's a little bit more straightforward. But what if we were to play Banette Gardevoir and Espathra in one deck? Would that ever be good? I don't know. Is it better than Xatu? Because you get the Curly engine and get Gardevoir EX, you can play a 50 HP Flittle. Just kind of spitballing ideas out there. But I want to see Banette Guardy get day 2. I think it's an underrated deck right now, and I wanted to highlight it behind that Banette Espathra deck. All right. Everyone's favorite deck, Dialga Matang. Can this deck do good in Orlando? Probably day 2. It's just one of those decks that is definitely more of a for fun deck. I don't see it doing like insanely well at Orlando, but it will definitely be in day 2. I'm gonna make my prediction right now. We'll see a Dialga in day 2. Heck, might be a Dialga on stream like there was at EYC. All right, Great Tusk Mill. Another deck I think a lot of people aren't really thinking of right now. Great Tusk Mill is like okay. It seems like it's an okay deck. Could be good against the Moon to Dunsparce deck because you can actually deck them out a lot quicker. They can use the Dunsparce to like not deck out, but you can also then mill the Dunsparces. So this deck could be okay into that matchup. I think your Tina matchup though is kind of shaky / abysmal. And then also your Zard matchup, I mean, could be close, right? That's the big thing. I guess Yell's Cheer gets a little awkward, but if they're cutting the Yell's Cheer, it's not as bad. So I don't know. Great Tusk Mill's cool. Might see one in day 2. It's just a deck nobody really thinks of. It's kind of just a mid deck, to be honest. And then finally, I wanted to highlight the Arc control deck from EUIC here that we saw. I think it was in top 32 or 16, one of the two. But I wanted to highlight this really cool Arc deck. So Arc is definitely a deck that has a lot of versatility. There's a lot of different ways you can build an Arc pile. You know, the main ways right now, you got the Arc Tina and the Arc Armor Rouge, but this Arc control deck, maybe somebody's going to explore it a little bit further for Orlando and play it and do well with it. That's going to be one of my predictions. We might see this deck have another decent placement in Orlando because somebody might play it and it makes some moves. So those are my predictions. If I were to predict what can win the tournament, I gotta give it up to Charizard. It's the best deck right now. It has the highest chance of winning Orlando by far, in my opinion. Gotta give it up for Charizard. I think it has the highest chance to win. I do think the Torbill will be most popular. Again, top 5 most popular decks. Charizard, Tina, Moon to Dunsparce, Shempao, Iron Hands. There you go. Boom. Potentially Moon to Dunsparce number 4, Shempao number 3, or Hand. I don't see Shempao being that popular. It's up in the air for sure, but those, in my opinion, will be the top 5 most popular decks. I could see a Lost Zone deck in top 8, a Lost Box pile in top 8 for sure. I think we'll see at least a Tina or 2 in top 8. Pidgeot Control, good chance they'll get top 8 too. Definitely a top 16, but a top 8 is definitely on the tables for Pidgeot Control also, as it can adapt to the format and the meta after EUIC. Those are my predictions for Orlando Regionals. Definitely excited for this tournament. I will be in attendance, and I cannot wait to play in Orlando, and hopefully I will meet some of y'all there at Orlando. I'm excited to theory craft the play and all that good stuff, and by the time this video goes up, I should already be at Orlando, so I'm excited for that. Great time, great weather, all that good stuff, and I hope you all enjoyed the video here. Well, let me know what you think of my meta predictions down in the comments below. That'll be it for me. Have a good day, and bye-bye.